And so that's when I said, if she don't Hawk Tuah, I don't want to talk Tuah. Alright guys, I'm back after a long break. We're actually in the middle of moving right now, so it's been a really busy month for us. I'm not the only one who's had a busy month though. If you've been, I don't know, gainfully employed the last couple of months, and you haven't heard of Haliey Welch, aka the Hawk Tuah girl, well, I'm sorry to tell you like this, but here goes. Haliey rose to fame, or notoriety, depending on how you look at it, after featuring in a man on the street style interview with Tim and D TV on TikTok. The mega viral clip is pretty simple. One of the hosts asks her a totally normal question.
What's one move in bed that makes a man go crazy every time?
And her response lights the internet on fire.
Oh, you gotta give him that Hawk Tuah and spit on that thing, you get me?
If this is the 2010s, we'd probably spend a couple weeks remixing the same spit on that thing memes over and over before eventually moving on from Hawk Tuah girl altogether. But these days, if you have a viral moment, you have to capitalize on it. That means merch, that means talk shows, and yes, that means starting your own podcast. Even though her claim to fame is a 10-second clip about BJ techniques, Jake Paul decided he wanted to give Haliey her own podcast under his media brand Better. It's called Talk Tuah with Haliey Welch, and I listened to both episodes out now so you don't have to. Also, by the way, I am recording this on Monday night. The third episode comes out tomorrow. I'm not listening to it because I don't want to, so you'll have to let me know if it's any better after the video. Now, I'll say this up top, this show is not very good. But I do want to be completely fair in my assessment, so I want to start with what I think was good about it. First of all, I think Haliey Welch has charisma to spare. I mean, that's why the first clip blew up in the first place. She's bold and unapologetically herself, and people gravitate towards that kind of person online. Her accent is definitely unique. You don't hear a lot of influencers talk in the southern drawl that she has, and she has a ton of energy to everything that she says. Now, the first episode is 55 minutes long, and the guest is comedian Whitney Cummings. I'll explain those air quotes in just a second. They explain in this episode that Whitney has been a pretty big part of Haliey's early days of success, almost sort of like a mentor to her, or Tuah, if you will. And that really comes through on the tape. I mean, what might ordinarily be an awkward introduction to long-form content from someone who has up until now not made any content of any form plays more like a comfortable conversation between friends. It's decently listenable. I didn't find myself wanting to turn it off every 3 seconds. And this is even with the occasional interjections from who I suppose is her manager, Jamie, and her friend, Chelsea. More on them later as well. But unfortunately for Haliey, her charisma just isn't enough to make up for the flawed conceit and construction of the show itself. I mean, the main problem is she just doesn't have that much to talk about. And I don't think Jake Paul or her managers particularly care. Now, this is where those air quotes come in. I say first in air quotes because the first words out of Haliey's mouth are welcome back to Talk Tuah with Haliey Welch.
Welcome back to Talk Tuah. Today I got Miss Whitney Cummings.
I had to go back and check and make sure I was listening to the actual first episode when I heard this. But it turns out she just recorded a bunch of them and didn't really have a firm schedule on when they would come out or which one would come out first even. Now I know that's a pretty standard release schedule for podcasts that regularly feature guests, but you'd think Haliey, and more importantly, the studio that's producing this podcast, would want to at least know for sure which one would come out first so they could introduce this brand new show to a brand new audience. Second, I say guest in air quotes because the most striking part of the first episode to me is how little control Haliey actually has over the conversation. For most of this episode, Whitney is the one driving the conversation, and I think she's doing most of the talking as well. What do they talk about on the show? Well, topics of conversation for this episode range from how totally cool Jake Paul actually is, to Haliey's, and let's be honest, mostly Whitney's experience fostering dogs, to just your run-of-the-mill relationship questions. Like I said, Haliey is plenty charismatic when she chimes in, and Whitney Cummings is obviously a professional who does well to keep the conversation moving. But Whitney is the one asking all the questions here, and there are two other voices in the room that don't even get an introduction. One of them is a man, his name is Jamie. He's her manager, I think. His thing is insisting that women shave for his pleasure.
Stop shaving your vagina hair.
Don't stop shaving your vagina hair. I don't know where the fuck Whitney's going with this. Don't stop.
No, I realize
we're gonna grow it out and put babes in it.
And Chelsea is her friend, who is very clearly trying her hardest, but not entirely comfortable as a media personality yet. All in all, I struggle to understand what this show is actually about, and how Haliey was going to continue making it without the help of a professional comedian. That became even more apparent when I listened to episode 2 and found that it was a mere 25 minutes long. In this episode, Haliey is sort of in control, not really, but the majority of the show still relies heavily on her group of friends from her hometown asking her questions about the aftermath of that video going viral. And when that story has run its course, and believe me, it has already, what will the show be about then? What's the plan? I don't think you can just have a bunch of guests come on and continue to ask Haliey how crazy it's been for her since she's risen to fame like this. Like, are we going to be asking her the same question a year from now? That's where I think Jake Paul and her managers have definitely failed her. They certainly haven't set her up for success because 90% of her podcast description is literally just talking about how she's part of the biggest meme of all time and how many famous people are looking to collaborate with her. Super vague, by the way. Just looking to collaborate? What does that mean? Just sit in a room near her while she's, I don't know, spits on that thing? There's mentions of games and segments, whatever that means. Again, super vague. But I certainly didn't hear any of that, and that's not really Haliey's fault if it's missing from the show. She didn't plan to go viral from that clip. She didn't plan to be an overnight internet micro celebrity. And the people who signed her need to take the time to help her with her interview skills if they're going to run her out there every week and try and make some money off of her. And on top of all of this, there are some interesting things that Haliey brings up that I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. A few times through the first 2 episodes, Haliey and her guests often ponder what you may have been pondering since you first saw the Hawk Tuah video yourself. Why is she famous in the first place? I've already mentioned a few potential reasons: her delivery, her accent, the pure shock value of the clip. It certainly all helps, but I think there's something deeper we need to discuss. Whitney Cummings puts forward her own theory, and I think she has the faintest hint of the right idea buried in the middle of a long anti-Me Too rant.
There's this epidemic where especially white women, super privileged white women, will talk about how hard their lives are and how, like, and when I was at this Hollywood party, the producer hugged me too long and, like, we all have to march. And you just blew by the fact that, like, yeah, this is my family situation. What? Move on.
Yeah, what about it?
It's like I'm not making this my thing.
It's like dark humor, too. That's like how most people deal with it.
But it's also, I don't want you to pity me, and I'm
Don't.
not going to try to be a victim in order to get attention.
I'm going to be generous and assume that the point Whitney is trying to make is that Haliey doesn't take herself too seriously. And okay, I think I agree with that part as being a reason for her popularity, sure. Also, time out. I don't really know who Whitney Cummings is. I certainly had no clue who she was before listening to this podcast. She doesn't exactly paint herself in glory here. It's just very weird for me to hear her reduce the Me Too movement down to like privileged white woman tears. Especially after Diddy just got arrested for all of his freak shit he's got going on. Again, I don't know anything about her. This is my first introduction to her. Probably not the best place to be learning about someone for the first time. But a couple of people that I really respect follow her on Instagram. So I don't know. Maybe all her stuff isn't like this. I'll let you pass judgment on who she actually is, what her content is like. Anyways, back to what I was saying. I think there's more to her popularity than just the fact that she doesn't take things too seriously and makes light of her childhood trauma, which, by the way, if you're listening to this episode first and haven't heard any of her other interviews, you would have no idea about. I think in Whitney's rant, she does inadvertently touch on one aspect of Haliey's rise to fame. And this is where I'm going to start to editorialize a bit, so feel free to disagree with me down in the comments below. This is just my opinion. But I think this Hawk Tuah video that's been going around is so popular because, like Whitney says, it is in opposition of the idea of the modern woman, and that it leans directly into some sort of male fantasy about how women should act. Now listen, I'm not saying that this one clip of Haliey in a drunk interview on Broadway in Nashville represents her whole person. I'm just saying I think that this video in particular was received with a lot more frat boy hell yeahs than any type of feminist pride. You know what I'm saying? Again, I could be way off base with that, but let me know what you think in the comments after you hear the rest of what my reasoning is. I promise there's more than just the vibe of that first 10-second clip that I'm going off of here. There's a couple more things that make me feel like the reason that this is blowing up the way it is due to the audience that she's appealing to. First of all, she signed with Jake Paul, who I think we can all agree is an all-time bad person. In fact, he just got done accusing Algerian Olympic gold medalist Imaine Khalif of secretly being a man in an attempt to discredit her victory and push the harmful idea that transgender athletes are destroying women's sports. The first guest on this podcast, produced by the Jake Paul Network, Whitney Cummings, also spends a good amount of time going after feminists, portraying them as whiny, privileged white women, and also referring to them offhand as hungry, filthy bitches, which is crazy.
How about you cook a meal so when he comes home from his construction job, there's food waiting?
I mean, I could do that.
I don't know. I'm weird like that. Like, you gotta earn that from me.
Okay.
I don't think he's earned that just yet.
I just don't. There's this new thing where, like, I don't know, women that are like think that they're empowered or like, I'm a feminist, I don't cook, I don't clean. I'm like,
No, I like doing that.
I'm like,
I
bitch,
love
what do
doing
you
that.
do?
Yeah, exactly. Besides, bitch.
Are you just like a hungry, filthy bitch? What do you?
You filthy
What do
bitch.
you bring to the table?
Yeah.
You know.
No, I love to clean. Cleaning's really fun.
Now, Haliey doesn't go after these women quite as hard as Whitney does, but she does take a little pride in not being like them, saying she deals with her trauma through dark humor.
It's like dark humor, too.
So relax, liberals, and that she actually enjoys cooking and cleaning. It's hard for me to say if she's just desperate to distance herself from groups under fire in this conversation with someone who clearly has some sort of influence over her, or if she genuinely agrees with the things that Whitney is saying. Either way, this is the market that she's settling into. Finally, there's a couple smaller details that Haliey lets slip here when she makes a couple comments about being in disbelief of how her audience behaves towards her in her DMs.
It's just like, I'd be reading my DMs and I'm like, oh my God, I'm posting this is my audience right here. I don't know, it's freaky.
Yeah.
Big question. Do you feel like guys try to hit on you?
Doesn't say anything explicitly here, but I get the sense she's talking about the way that men are speaking to her in her comments. And again, she hints at the certain sphere of influence that she's entered here when she says that she's only been interviewed by 2 women, including Whitney Cummings, and it's connected really strongly with them.
And then, so what has been the most fun, like, moment where you're like, okay, this is worth it?
Okay, so besides you, like, the one woman that I've, like, been interviewed by was Caitlin Bristow. I clicked with her.
Yeah.
Really
I love
good.
her. She's a
love
good
that
one.
girl.
Which is not really much of anything, right, on its own, but it is interesting when you combine it with everything else and the audience and the sphere of influence that she's entered into. And look, there's nothing inherently wrong with Haliey profiting off of this type of audience and this type of engagement. Especially because I can't really tell if she has much of a genuine, like, unironic audience at all. If she does, then obviously it's a problem if there are any young girls listening. But I think her meteoric rise to fame was propelled by guys who are into this kind of thinking. And any fame she maintains will probably be from college-aged women who attend SEC schools. She may also be a victim of what I call the OnlyFans effect, where dudes will share the Hawk Tuah video with their other male friends. Hey dude, wouldn't it be awesome if our wives talk like this? And then get mad at Haliey when she begins to profit off of it, talking about how stupid it is in the first place and how she has no talent. I call this the OnlyFans effect, because you see it when the very guys who patronize a woman's OnlyFans account turn around and get mad at her and shame her for having one in the first place, just because she's making money off of it. But it could also be the simple fact that she has one viral clip out there, and not many people are interested in anything else she has to say. Either way, I think she'll struggle to gain any traction if her and her managers don't change the approach they're taking to the show. She's got the personality to be successful online, I still believe that. But she has to improve her skills as an interviewer, and the show has to be more than retelling the Hawk Tuah story over and over and over again. Again, like I said, I didn't listen to episode 3, I don't plan on it because I don't want to. But if it turns out to be better than these first 2, you guys let me know in the comments below. But honestly, I'm Hawk Tuah out for the time being, so I'll leave that up to you. I'm genuinely wishing her the best. I just hope that her audience can behave itself for her sake and for ours. But I've been Aaron Trevino. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And leave a comment down below if you had a chance to tune in to Hawk Tuah with Haliey Welch. I'm going to try and start picking some comments of the week for this part of the video, so comment down below for your chance to be featured next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Subscribe to that thing.